What is going on YouTube? Today I have a different kind of video for you. I'm going to try and go over how to price check items. Now, I've just noticed that like in my stream and in my comments of my YouTube videos, a lot of people have been having questions and having problems with price checking their items. So I thought today I would show you guys 4 items I personally think are kind of interesting on how you price check them. You might think it's just as simple as, use a price checking tool. I personally use Exile Exchange 2, and then just plugging in all the stats and then taking a look at the items. But a lot of times, if you go through that methodology, you'll find that there's 0 matched items. What do we do then? Or you might like plug in all of your items and you think, holy shit, we hit the jackpot. We are fucking rich. This is 30 div. You put the item in for 30 div and it never sells. So the first thing I want to go over is valuable stats, okay? If you plug in an unvaluable stat into your search, for example, freeze duration, well, let's just take a look here. So with these 5 stats, which is just high evasion rating / energy shield, so high defenses, 1 resistance, 32 dex, high life, 35 ms, what do we get as a result? We have only 2 boots that have similar stats to this. Now, does this mean that my boots are fucking insane? No, it does not. Because you look here, the first boot has not sold for 5 div in 11 hours, which means that it's probably not even worth 5 div. So if we add on a useless stat here, like reduce freeze duration, all we're doing is we're making the potential pool of sales to compare our item with, we just tighten that even further. So this doesn't give us more information, this actually gives us less information because this is not a valuable stat. People don't care about freeze duration on their boots, which isn't to say that it doesn't do anything. It's just that people don't look for the stat specifically. What this first point that I'm trying to prove is that you just need to make sure you're not including useless stats into your filter, because these useless stats will completely just make your search way too narrow and it won't give you an idea of how much your items are actually worth. So if I were to search here, you might think, oh shit, 5 div. Okay, well, 5 div, that's good enough. I'll sell it for 4 and we'll be good to go. And under normal circumstances, this is the exact correct way to go about this. However, I'm gonna tell you right now, these boots I've had up on trade for 2 div for almost 48 hours now and they have not sold. And the reason why is because there's 2 things. You have to know what your useless stats are. You also have to know what your premium stats are. So premium stats are stats that are actually going to be the stats that people look for and are willing to pay money for in order to buy the item. So for example, of a premium stat, it's going to be resistance. People love resistance. Life. This is a hybrid ES EV boots. The type of player buying this is oftentimes going to be hybrid energy shield, evasion rating, and they're also going to be playing life. So having life on these boots is just a good stat. Movement speed. This is like a giga premium stat. The boots do not sell without movement speed. You can have everything else bis roll without 35% MS. It's not going to sell for that much. And the last thing is this dex roll. This is a non-premium stat. It doesn't do nothing, right? But it's not a premium stat. People don't look for dex on the boots specifically. And if they do, the amount of people who do it are far less than the amount of people who are looking for elemental res, total life, movement speed, okay? This changes from league to league. It just so happens that this league, we're not in a league where there's deck stacking or where the builds that require these kind of boots are really attribute hungry. They get most of their attributes from the tree, not from their gear. As a result, this is a nice to have, but not a need to have. So if we remove this from our search, we go from 2 searches to 91, and then the picture becomes way more clear. Okay, so these boots without the decks are worth like a div, right? Maybe even less than a div. So if I were to put this up for 5 div or 15 div or even 3 div, these will never sell. But this, unlike this, has value. If I'm gonna buy a boot that has the same stats here or very similar stats, and one has dex and one doesn't, guess what? I'm buying the dex stat. So as a result, right, these didn't sell for 2 div for 2 days. However, these could potentially go for 1 div. And that's exactly what I'm gonna put them up for as the price.
Hey, someone is bound to buy that.
Awesome. And that is exactly how I price a lot of my items. And as you see, I have a lot of sales. Like this is a tried and true method. This is exactly how I go about, and I make multiple mirrors every single league pricing items, because it's all about efficiency. You want to take a look at your items really quickly and then understand exactly what stats you need to go for. Like I think that right there is just like the basics. I think a lot of people don't really think about too much. And I feel like they should think about more. So the next thing I want to get into really quickly is just going to be about how to price resistance gear. And this is going to be probably like most of the issues that you are going to have pricing gear is going to be doing resistances. So if we take these boots, for example, if we input all the important stats, we get something like this. I mean, every single one of these stats is important. Life, movement speed, defenses, resistance, armor to elemental damage. These are all important. Let's exclude this armor to elemental so we can get more of a search result. And we take a look here. We see there are 13 boots showing with these specific stats However, and this is going to be something that I'm going to go into next, is about comparable stats. Cold res, lightning res, and fire res. These are all comparable stats. Like 1 point of cold is just as valuable as 1 point of lightning, which is just as valuable as 1 point of fire. So instead of looking for 42 cold res specifically and 22 lightning res, this is 64 resistance total. What if the boot has like 35 cold res and 35 lightning res? We end up getting more resistances total, but our filter will completely exclude that. So instead, what we should do is look here, or total elemental res. So if we put a total elemental res sum of 64 instead of cold res and lightning res, our search results will go from 13 to 112, which means if we just look for these specific numbers of cold and lightning res, we are going to be excluding like over 100 results of comparable items to compare the pricing of our items to, which is really, really bad. So it's important that when you search for resistance items, you don't look for specific cold and lightning rolls. All we care about is the total amount of resistances that we're getting on our boots, not specific amounts of cold and specific amounts of lightning, because that constricts our search too much. If we just look for specific rolls of resistance, we might think, oh shit, our boots are worth like 1, maybe 2 div, but there's only 13 results. Once we expand our pool to 64 resistance of any kind, not specifically lightning cold at specific numbers, then we see, oh shit, there's actually 112 boots that are similar to ours, and it's looking more like half a div versus 2 div. But the next thing I want to go into is a little bit more of like a complex example of how to price an item. And this happens a lot with these kind of like flat damage to attacks situations here, because you can look at this quiver and you can say, holy shit, this is pretty nice, right? We have tier 3 bow damage, tier 4 fire damage, tier 1 lightning damage, increased crit tier 5, crit damage bonus tier 1, attack speed tier 2. This quiver is phenomenal. And I'm not saying it's not. There's a difference between being 5 div phenomenal and being 30 div phenomenal. If we are to just say, okay, these are all premium stats, which they all are. Flat damages are all premium. Bow skills premium, crit chance premium, crit damage bonus premium, increased attack speed also premium. And then also it's on the best base, right? These are all premium values to our quiver. So if we type in all the values in and we click search, we only see 2 items matched with 30 divine as one and then 100 divine as a second. Let's take a closer look at these bows or at these quivers. So one thing you consider here is that the roll ranges matter. So for example, our roll ranges are 3, 4, 1, 5, 1, 2. This guy's is 2, 1, 2, 1, 1, 5. So his is like almost all tier 1s or 2s except for this one on the crit chance. Right off the bat there, ours are immediately not comparable. Half the value of that at most. But on top of that, there's one thing to consider. We have things that are equivalent to each other. For example, is tier 1 fire damage pretty much the same thing as tier 1 lightning damage? Yes, like they're roughly the same, right? But if we just plug in our filter like this and this is saying it needs to be tier 4 fire damage or higher, and it needs to be tier 1 lightning damage or higher. Now, assuming that these are the same values, what happens if it was flipped? If the item was tier 1 fire and tier 1 lightning, we would never actually see that item because although they're the same, our filter would exclude it. So here's a situation where you can do something pretty cool. So let's plug in these values again. In a situation where like 2 stats are like pretty much equivalent, I highly recommend that you use either a count or a weighted sum function on trade. So here you just do attacks, attack, attack, attack. Now, truthfully, there is some sort of weighting, right? Where tier 1 fizz is probably more valuable than tier 1 lightning. Tier 1 lightning is probably more valuable than tier 1 fire. Tier 1 fire is probably more valuable than tier 1 cold. And this changes based off of the meta. Tier 1 fizz is only so important because poison build is so meta right now. But normally tier 1 fizz is like 3rd on the list, okay? So you have to have a little understanding of the meta, but at the same time, a simple way you can do this is people just really look at the tiers, right? They just want tier 1, tier 2, tier 2, and they think, okay, that's good enough. So what you can just do, you can find out the roll ranges, and then you can just put like tier 4, tier 4, tier 4, tier 4, and you can just call it a day there. Another thing you can do is a weighted sum. So then you can just go attacks, and you set up the same thing here, but instead of having to do anything about the roll ranges, you can just say, okay, look, my quiver, it has 17 damage on the fire, 30 damage on the lightning. That's 47 damage total. And then maybe we can do something here like 1.2 weighting on fizz, or maybe even like 1.3 weighting on fizz, because fizz has a premium, or maybe 43, because we want to see a little bit below what we're searching for. So now what we're searching for is damage with bow skills, crit chance, again, crit damage bonus. And these are all 10 to 20% lower than the stats we want. And then it has attack speed. We can lower this to 10 as well. And then we have our flat damage to attacks on the bow. And this is the only thing that we're really changing here. Now we're not just looking for specifically lightning and fire. We're looking for any combination of fizz, lightning, fire, cold, because these all have approximately the same value. And we don't want to just look for 2 because that narrows our search so much. So then it goes from being 30 div minimum with only 2 searches possible. We have 48 results now. And then the pricing for our quiver becomes a lot more apparent. It's not like that guy's selling for 30, we can sell ours for 15, and then we lower it over time. It's like, oh shit. It's actually not as good as we thought it was. Because look here. Tier 1 fizz, tier 4 cold, roughly the same. Bow damage, roughly the same. Crit damage, roughly the same. Attack speed, a little bit better than ours. Crit chance, like 2 tiers better than ours. This quiver actually might be just as good, if not better than ours. So that is incredibly important to do. Like, you have to find stats that are comparable to each other and then price it the same. Another example of this is spell damage or even gain. So for here, we have an obliterator bow, right? This is incredibly meta right now. It has 600 DPS. You can put 600 DPS in, and then it has extra gain, onslaught, plus attacks. If we look here, holy shit, 30 results, 18 to 25 div are the cheapest prices. What does that mean for us? Well, under these specific criteria, the bows are being sold. What if instead of gain as extra lightning, we have any other gain? Gain as lightning is an option, gain as fizz is an option, gain as cold is an option. Gain as fizz is also an option. So what if we do a count here? And now this is just saying, instead of being just gain as lightning, we look for any of these 4 gain combinations, and then we see the search results. We go from 30 to 50 results, and then the minimum price is now 10 div instead of 18. You see what I'm saying here? Is that you need to find comparable things, because ultimately, gain is extra lightning, gain is extra fire, gain is extra cold, gain is extra fizz. These are all very, very close to being similar. Now, there are situations where gain as lightning might have a premium, but I'll tell you this league is not the case for that, because this only happens when some sort of lightning bow skill is most meta, like lightning arrow, and that is not the case this league. The most meta bow skill is going to be poison, and poison actually wants gain as extra fizz, which is why you'll see so many gain as extra fizzes being sold here for so cheap. It's just because this is where the biggest market is. Now, that's just something that you need to think about, right? If you want to actually sell this bow out pretty quickly, you won't actually be able to sell it for 18 div. So that's kind of what I mean. And that's all I'm trying to say with comparable stats is like gain is extra lightning, gain is extra fire, flat lightning, flat fizz, flat, all that stuff. They're all roughly comparable to each other. And you want to find a way to equate them to each other in order to be able to price your items appropriately. This applies for everything, spell damage and lightning damage. Like last league, we were in a meta where like lightning damage and spell damage were like the same thing because everyone was playing Spark and everyone wanted to get their lightning damage up. Or at the very least, lightning damage was very, very similar to spell damage because there were also some builds that like did cast on crit comet, that kind of stuff where you want spell damage more than lightning damage. You just kind of have to think about that a little bit. You know, like if you have lightning damage, can you equate that to spell damage? Sure. Even if they're not 1-to-1, you could say like every point of lightning damage is 0.7 as valuable as spell damage. And then you just have to set up a weighted sum, and then it'll help you find a better pool of items to compare your items to. And that's pretty much all there is to pricing. If you understand these couple concepts, number one being like what the premium stats on your item are, what the mid stats on your item are, and what the useless stats on your item are. That's gonna be like 90% of the battle. And then once you start getting to more expensive items, like big ticket items that are worth multiple divs, then it's kind of important to understand what the comparable stats are. Like this tier 4 fire damage. If this is tier 1 fire damage and this is tier 4 lightning damage, is this quiver worth roughly the same? In this league specifically, yes, it is. So if you set up a filter for just tier 4 and tier 1, you're going to be missing out on so many of the comparable items to compare your stats and your pricing to. Same thing for gains, same thing for spell versus like percentage lightning, that kind of stuff. It's just super, super important for you to understand these few principles. And if you do, pricing your items is going to be a walk in the park. Anyways, that's all there really is to the video. If this was helpful and you liked the video, please like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope to see you guys again in the next one.